Before starting this section, you should have already covered functional groups, which we're going to talk about, carbohydrates, which have that CnH2nON formula, lipids, which have that long hydrophobic tail and that acid group, nucleic acids, which are made of nucleotides, which are made of sugar, phosphate, and a base bonded down one side. And now we're going to talk about proteins. And a lot of students have the most trouble identifying the monomers and the polymers of proteins. So the monomers we're going to talk about are amino acids. So it's important in order to understand proteins is to really understand the parts of the amino acids. It's the monomer. So that's our first goal. Our second goal is to identify the backbone in a protein, because if you can identify the backbone, you can see the repeating units and you can see if it's a monomer or a polymer. And then the third goal is to identify the side chains in proteins. So if you really understand the first part here, the second part and third part are going to come very, very easily to you. And don't worry, we're going to work a lot on this during class as well. Okay, so we're going to start with amino acids. So the monomer here is the amino acid. And it's really great because the name tells us pretty much what it looks like. If you remember from your functional groups, amino looks like this. It's got an N, and it's got two H's. So this is the lovely amino group, NHH. And then next to that, we have a carbon called the alpha carbon, which maybe will help you remember it. And this has at least one H attached to it. And whatever else is attached to it, we call that the R group. This is called the side chain. And then finally, we get to the acid part. If you remember, it's C double bond O, OH. And there's 3 different ways you can write this. There's 4 different ways you can write this. All of them are equally correct. So here's our amino acid. And this is where it gets its name from. And between the amino and the acid is the alpha carbon, which contains the side chain. The side chain is really, really important. Right here. That's our side chain. Okay. So these condense to form polymers a little bit differently than in the carbohydrates or the lipids, because we saw in the carbohydrates and lipids, it's pretty much just OH groups involved. In the amino acids, it's the amino group and the acid group that combine. So here's a second amino acid with a different side chain called R1. And the parts that are going to combine to form our water molecule, we can circle. So that's going to be the acid part, the OH from the acid part, and one of the H's from the amine. And it doesn't matter, it could be this H, it could be that H. They are both equally correct. So don't worry about that. Okay, and so when this, I'm not going to redraw the whole thing. So this would release one water molecule because we've got 2 amino acids combining. And this would form a new amino acid that will look something like this. So I'm going to start in the middle. So this C would now be attached to this N. And that is a special bond called a peptide bond. And so one of these H's is gone, the N is still attached to another H. So this right here in white, like that, white right here, this is called a peptide bond. And so that's the special bond that's formed between the acid and the amino group. So it's right there. And so then the rest of this would be drawn in over here. So we'd still have the alpha carbon with whatever that's attached to, the amino, and then this alpha carbon with whatever that's attached to, and then the acid. Okay. So this is exactly what this would look like. We have now formed this peptide bond, which is so, so special for proteins. We now have one side chain, two side chains, and we have one backbone unit and two backbone units. Okay. So, again, just like we saw in the nucleic acids, anything that isn't that base, that's the backbone. So in the nucleic acids, it was the sugar and the phosphate bonded down one side. Here, it's everything except for this R group. So it's the amino, it's the alpha carbon and this H, and it's the acid. So I've drawn for you a longer peptide so we can kind of practice this. Okay. We color-coded it a little differently. Okay, so first off, let's look for the backbone. We can make the rest of that go away. 1 second while I get adjusted here. There, beautiful. Okay, so step number 1, we can identify the backbone. And so what the backbone looks like is this NH, CH, and then C double bond O. And these are going to be all connected together. So we see here, and this actually has two H's, so that's fine. We just need one H. So NH, CH, C double bond O. So this is our first amino acid. And then next to it we see this peptide bond right here. This is a C double bond O attached to an N. So this right here is a peptide bond. And then we see another amino acid unit, NH, C double bond O. So that's one more backbone, so we've got at least one more amino acid. And then attached to that, we've got another one, NH, C, the H is pointing up this time instead of down, but it still counts. It can be pointed up, it can be pointed down, they're equally correct. So NH, C double bond O, OH. So all we need is the C double bond O, and that counts for a backbone unit. So here's the last one, and we see nothing else attached to that. Because if this was attached to another amino acid, it would be C double bond O, N. Instead, we see C double bond O, OH. So this is the acid, this is the end. It's not attached to anything, because this part right here, this OH, would be different if it was attached to another amino acid. So just like we saw here, C double bond O, N, this is attached to another amino acid. This C double bond O is attached to an OH. This is not another amino acid. Okay, so the part that most people get confused about is the second part, identifying side chains. Because some of the side chains, and I've drawn one here, look like the backbone. And so we're going to practice this a lot in class, so don't worry if you're confused right now, because we'll do tons and tons of practice on this. So the side chains are attached to the alpha carbon, which has an H attached to it, and they can be anything. So you actually have 20 different options. But you're not going to have to memorize those. So you'll probably just see a few simple ones like this. Okay, so alpha carbon, you remember, this is between the NH amino and the C double bond O, OH. So the alpha carbon always has at least one H attached to it. That H is part of the backbone. And the other thing is the side chain. So I'm going to draw these in blue. I'm going to circle these in blue. There we go. So there's the side chain. There's a side chain on amino acid 1. Okay, amino acid 2. Where do you think the side chain is? First, we identify where the alpha carbon is. This is not even a carbon. The alpha carbon is between the amino and the C double bond O. So this is the alpha carbon, right here, alpha carbon. And so this one's tricky because one of these H's is going to be the backbone and one of these is going to be the side chain, and it doesn't matter which. So this is the simplest amino acid you can see. This is actually called glycine. This is everyone's favorite because the side chain is so simple. And it's really easy to identify. No complicated chemistry here. Okay, so next one, NH, CH, and we know opposite that H, it could be pointed at the top or at the bottom. That's going to be the side chain. So here we've got 1, 2, 3 side chains and 1, 2, 3 repeating backbone units. So the repeating backbone units are everything that we didn't circle. It's an amino group, a full amino group on this side, alpha carbon, C double bond O. NHCH, C double bond O. NHCH, C double bond O, OH. So this COOH tells us that it's time to stop. This is the end. This is the start, and this is the end. Okay, and these things that we've circled in blue are the side chains. So if you can count the number of side chains, you can see if it's a monomer or polymer. So if you just see one side chain, it's monomer. You see more than one, like in this example, it's a polymer. You'll also see the peptide bonds here and here. C double bond O, and instead of being attached to an OH, it's attached to an N. So those ideas are what's going to help you identify whether a protein is a monomer or a polymer. And so side chains like this get a little confusing, and we'll work on that more in class because this looks like this part of the backbone. But as you can see, this is attached to a C, but the next thing it's attached to is not an N. So this isn't a separate amino acid. And we're going to work on that a lot during class. We're going to pull out all the confusing examples and try to deconvolute them for you.